The Fukushima nuclear power plant is operating successfully in the year 2011, and everything is okay. The structure shakes violently as the largest earthquake in Japanese history suddenly hits the island, sending furniture flying everywhere. The control room staff makes an announcement of an emergency shutdown and successfully turns off the power in time. As soon as the earthquake is over, the workers get to work assessing the condition of the units and restoring electricity. Prime Minister Azuma makes the decision to call off today's meeting in the city so that the officials may focus on determining the extent of the earthquake's damage. Vice President Murakami informs everyone at the Tokyo headquarters that the main power plants are out of commission and gives them the go-ahead to put restoring power before everything else. Employees at the nuclear reactor facilities have been instructed to leave due to a tsunami warning. They race to the lone isolated building under Yoshida's leadership, and when they exit, they see how many people were injured. They find that Unit 1 is losing pressure too quickly, as if it were overcooling, in the control room, so they decide to close the valves in accordance with procedure. They also notice that Unit 4's water levels are dropping and get concerned that something might be broken, so they send several men to investigate. People are racing towards the nearest evacuation shelter, but they occasionally have to stop going because the ground occasionally trembles. Even though it's his free day, Furu drops his family off there before heading to assist with the power problems. 3 employees finally arrive at the power plant to check on Unit 4. They are astonished to witness a massive tsunami approaching when they abruptly discover movement in the sea while crossing the road. As the enormous tsunami strikes the plant and crashes through windows and vehicles, the trio flees. The trio enters Unit 4 as the other workers flee, but they are hardly inside before water begins to leak in as well. All the equipment go out as the facility begins to fill up, leaving the workers to labor in the dark. 2 employees are moving through the sealed hallways at the plant's help facility when the power goes out just as they are about to pass the last door, leaving them stuck. The men try to kick the door as the tsunami approaches, but it is reinforced and will not yield. One of the men is immediately covered when the wave strikes the structure at that precise moment and breaks the glass. The second person is trying to keep his head above water as the passageway progressively fills up, but the weight is too strong, and soon it will be forcing him up into the ceiling. After that, the wave strikes a different generator, knocking out electricity to a different structure. The people in the control room believe the unit readings to be accurate, and they fail to notice the water flowing through the hallways as it is captured on the surveillance cameras. The plant buildings by the water are currently totally submerged, and the neighboring roads are congested with traffic. Power suddenly goes out in the control room, and before the computer shuts down, they realize all the generators are deactivated. News that the plant submitted an Article 15 alert to the government without first contacting Tokyo reaches the Prime Minister's Cabinet Crisis Center in Tokyo. When Murakami phones Yoshida to demand an explanation, he finds out that the plant is shut down and that only the seismically isolated building has access to a gas turbine that can provide enough power to keep a few lights on. There is no way for them to determine whether the reactors are in excellent condition or not, and Yoshida is unsure of what to do because no training scenario had ever anticipated this. For the time being, they will keep studying the emergency handbook and work to create a procedure. Soon after, the government issues a statement reassuring the public that there have been no reports of radioactive material harming the outside and that there is no need for concern. The need to power the control room in the remote facility is urgent, so Yoshida sends his troops to request mobile generators from headquarters and fire engines from the self-defense force in case they need to use outside water to cool the reactors. They decide to try activating the gauge with car batteries in the control room, and as a worker searches for them, they talk about how they will need to open the water valve to cool the reactors. Azuma announces a nuclear emergency, the first of its type in Japan, back at the crisis center. Although none of the officials are in favor of it, Azuma believes that stopping the Americans from departing should come first. A little while later, the amount of white smoke starts to diminish, which is a bad indication because it signifies the water level in the pool has peaked. Yoshida asks the truck's workers for assistance, but the hose is still broken. When they are about to give up hope, the expert arrives at the factory and says he is prepared to take a risk in order to save his nearby family. The Minister of Defense assures Azuma that he will assist while military planes prepare a novel type of material that will enable them to block radiation at specific ranges. Yoshida is trying to figure out a means to deliver water to the reactor building's 5th floor at the plant. He receives a message from Tokyo at that very moment stating that construction companies are volunteering their mobile pumps to assist, and they quickly set up the delivery. The military personnel are preparing to shower the area with water, although they are advised to exercise caution due to the nearby westerly winds. The initial water dump is successful once the aircrafts arrive and fly cautiously while monitoring the radiation levels. The second dump is quickly followed by, and as soon as they are finished, the army departs. As soon as the fire truck has been fixed by the expert, employees start moving the portable pumps so they can start dousing the units with water. They confirm that they have pumped almost 100 tons of water 1 hour later. Another aftershock strikes the building as the teams celebrate, but mercifully nothing is damaged. When Azuma telephones the American president to share the good news, the leader continues to stand by his decision to keep the evacuation order in place. The administration is criticized by the media for several days afterward, with claims that they are concealing the truth and have broken their partnership with the United States. From that point on, however, American and Japanese cooperation picks up speed, and the U.S. dispatches a fleet of naval ships, together with nuclear experts and plenty of material, to offer support. With the assistance of many wonderful people, the plant continues to inject water without interruption. Eventually, 200 people gather at Tokyo's headquarters to establish a system that can respond in an organized manner. After a lot of laborious effort, the reactors settle and electricity is ultimately restored to the control room, allowing that team to depart the building. They still don't know why the reactors stabilized so quickly after losing control. Even now, only 2 persons were killed in the tragedy, it is revealed days later, and the remains are sent to the families for a proper funeral. Their coworkers, however, are unable to go because they continue to work non-stop on cooling the units. On March 11th, everything started, and as of April, they are still there. Dismantling the power plant is taking just as long as it did to create it, if not longer. In the reactors, there is still a sizable amount of unused nuclear fuel 6 years later in 2017, and no person can get close to it. According to statistics, the levels are even higher than they were in Hiroshima. By 2019, they have discovered that they are capable of moving the most hazardous waste, but they are unsure of where to keep it. The residents who once lived in the region have already left their homes, and they are unsure of how long it will take to decommission the reactors. Thousands of homes are vacant, domestic animals lost their owners and all died, but because wild animals are returning their habitat, they appear to be more alive than ever. Following the incident, cancer claimed Yoshida's life, most likely as a result of radiation poisoning, though Yoshida believes it was caused by his smoking. A commission is also looking into him, but Yoshida is most concerned with telling this tale to future generations. Yoshida passed away in 2013 at the age of 58, and his account was later published as the Yoshida Testimony. The incident's aftermath is still unsolved as of 2023, and decommissioning efforts are still ongoing. Yoshida ultimately snaps and yells at the Tokyo team, telling them he'll decide what's best for his team before hanging up as an argument breaks out between Murakami and Yoshida over how to proceed. A bus arrives to transport the injured, but even when it is fully loaded, it can't fit everyone. Unexpectedly, a worker reports that they have discovered salt water buildup in Unit 4's basement and will attempt to transport it to the pit to cool the reactors. Now that more debris has been moved, it's time to transfer the fire vehicles to Units 5 and 6. Additionally, some help will be needed to knock down Unit 4's door. As quickly as they can, workers and large equipment start to work, only to find that there isn't enough hose left to reach the basement. Yoshida instructs his assistant to begin preparing for the evacuation when the control center phones to say that Unit 2's fuel rods are all exposed at that precise moment. Yoshida then calls Tokyo to let them know that everyone else should be evacuated, but he and a certain number of operators would stay to continue injecting water. Yoshida must now make the difficult option of deciding who will stick by him through the end. When Azuma learns of this plan, he freaks out and yells at everyone. He doesn't calm down until he realizes that some men will still remain at the plant and that it won't be fully abandoned. Azuma arrives at Tokyo shortly after and complains about all the breakdowns in communication. He then declares he will start working there as chief of operations going forward. He wants everyone, including himself, to be prepared to pass away immediately. Yoshida tells everyone to get back to work after lowering his pants and scratching his behind for the camera to emphasize his point. Later, while working in the control room to replace the gauge battery, an explosion is immediately heard, and the building begins to tremble. The suppression chamber pressure has dropped to 0, which would indicate a hole, they tell Yoshida. As the radiation level rises, Yoshida orders the men to check the settings. Then, Units 3 and 4 report hearing a concussive sound, which denotes a sharp increase in radiation. Yoshida calls Tokyo after giving up, and to Azuma's horror, Murakami agrees to the departure of the majority of the workers. Yoshida makes the evacuation official and instructs the captains of each squad to select a member to remain behind. The workers bid the men staying behind their final goodbyes before the buses arrive at the plant. Yoshida then permits the remaining group to make contact with their relatives before returning to work. Reporters discuss how the airport is becoming congested with all the immigrants in the nation returning home as a newscast's chopper soars above the plant. To begin a new host connection outside, workers have finished clearing the debris, but for some reason the water isn't pumping. Yoshida encourages them to keep trying, but Azuma consults a special advisor because he is considering performing a cold shutdown, but is unsure if they will be able to bring the reactors under control. The advisor demonstrates what will happen if the reactors blow up, destroying a 170 square kilometers region. As a result, that circle must be forcibly relocated, and the 250-kilometer wide circle outside must be evacuated and maintained off-limits. For the next few decades, they will be uninhabitable, and the Japanese economy will collapse. There would only be the south and the north of the nation. Azuma meets with the Minister of Defense shortly after, who has sent an airplane for reconnaissance and determined that the radiation levels make further work impossible. The minister is concerned about a second hydrogen explosion, but Azuma maintains that sucking water from the sky is their only option. The minister then agrees to send another plane to find a solution when Azuma makes the point that if they don't resolve this, the nation is in danger and will be open to foreign attacks. The employees at the plant keep attempting to fix the truck, but to no effect. When Yoshida phones a specialist for advice, they inform him that the operation is hard and that only 4 people could not complete it in the dark. Yoshida thanks the expert and declines his offer to come over and fix it himself because he can't accept such a sacrifice. A little while later, Unit 4 is seen emitting white smoke, indicating that the pool water has seemingly started to evaporate. Azuma is currently conversing with the U.S. President, who had sent a message requesting that all Americans currently residing in Japan return. Azuma begs the President to avoid spreading more fear, but the President demands that all information on the plant be made public and that American nuclear specialists be permitted to attend Azuma's policy meetings. Yoshida had just been acting for Tokyo, thus this was part of the plan. Nevertheless, the workers are still pumping salt water. The operation succeeds when the water level rises after a few seconds of pumping. Azuma gives the usage of salt water his blessing a short while later. However, it seems the water levels won't increase any longer, indicating that the water isn't getting inside, no matter how many times they check the hose and the connection. 2 employees are dispatched to investigate the issue, and when they return, they see that the pressure inside the reactor is increasing, indicating that there must be a leak somewhere. They decide to send people to try the valves again after speaking with Tokyo. Another aftershock rocks the bridge as a team heads to the Unit 2 suppression chamber, but thankfully it is a small one and they can continue moving. They discover their shoes are melting as they travel deeper inside, and the GM meter starts acting strangely, so they are forced to turn around and leave. When Yoshida calls Tokyo to alert them to the potential of a complete meltdown, he receives instructions to take any necessary steps to locate the valve in Unit 2. Yoshida consults the instructions and decides to attempt activating the valve with a number of vehicle batteries. The control room is where the batteries are joined to one another to form a massive circuit. When they connect them to the main computer, The activation sadly fails, therefore they will need to find extra batteries to supplement the power. In the meantime, more fire vehicles have arrived, but they will first need to clear a lot of rubble before they can run a hose. They must move quickly since Yoshida observes that the containment vessel's pressure is approaching the limit. 1 hour later, Yoshida informs Toko that the batteries are operational and that Unit 2's valve has been opened, causing the pressure in the nuclear reactor to start lowering. Yoshida is forced to instruct the workers to begin injecting water rather than evacuating when Murakami commands him to resume operations. The water flows better this time, indicating that the vessel is being properly accessed. When the new fire trucks do arrive near Unit 3, the employees rush to clear the rubble as quickly as they can. Yoshida rushes to the window to confirm his uneasy suspicion when the building suddenly begins to tremble. Unit 3 has been completely destroyed by another explosion. The firefighters inside the fire truck are still alive and they realize the radiation levels are rising quickly, forcing them to kick open the door and exit the vehicle. They search for the other truck and find additional people hiding underneath it. Then they rescue them. Luckily, none of them are dead, even if several of them are hurt. They give up on the truck since it won't start and dash back to the offices. Even though many other workers with fatal injuries encourage them not to worry about them, the group ignores them and helps them travel back against their warnings. The public becomes extremely alarmed after learning about the second explosion via the news. Yoshida is informed in the office that Unit 4's temperature is increasing, indicating that the explosion must have resulted in a leak. There are only 5 hours left before the fuel rods are once more exposed in Unit 2 because the water level there is also starting to drop. Azuma in Tokyo recognizes that the catastrophe level will need to be raised to 7 for the first time since Chernobyl. All of the injured workers now drive a vehicle they discovered nearby to the office. When the front desk staff checks on them, they find that the contamination level is too high to even diagnose them. A few personnel are attempting to maintain injection into Unit 2 despite the fact that the fire truck is no longer operational, but the pump should still function, as Yoshida learns. Unfortunately, the explosion shut off the valve, rendering the car batteries useless. The number of exposed fuel rods is rapidly increasing, but because they are on the 5th level of each reactor building, accessing them would require walking over radioactive debris, which might rupture at any time. Yoshida makes the time-sensitive decision to resume work on Units 3 and 4 after deciding to focus on opening the valve in Unit 2 due to stress. Another press conference is being convened in Tokyo to discuss the second explosion, but officials are continuing to claim that there isn't much radioactive material being spread around. Everyone believes the country is already doomed as misinformation and hysteria spread online. People are placing the blame for the issues on the employees, and their behavior resembles a witch hunt. Similar statements are being pushed by TV hosts, which is unfair to the employees' relatives. The Unit 2 valve has still not been opened after a short while. The primary containment vessel's pressure is finally decreasing, and the white smoke is actually water vapor rising from the reactor, according to information they receive as they deliberate their next move. This indicates that the compressor Yoshida sent out is actually functioning and the first vent valve is a success. A team of employees is using large equipment to move the rubble outside the Unit 1 building. This enables the fire truck to eventually show up, allowing them to begin assembling the water pump. As they link everything, they clear more obstructions from the way and locate the water intake, allowing them to use the fire truck to start pumping water into the structure to aid with cooling. A short while later, Yoshida and the fire truck driver begin talking about the possibility that once they run out of fresh water, they would need to continue the injection with salt water. They'll need to run a line, therefore they'll need to travel far to the wharf. Yoshida should have requested permission before sending the order, but he feels that doing so would be a waste of time given the urgency of the situation. Another aftershock strikes the buildings abruptly, and this one is particularly violent, seriously damaging the ceilings. As everyone in the control room puts on masks, they all wonder what the loud boom was. A staff member in the office then reports that the 5th story of the reactor building is completely gone. Yoshida rushes outside and sees that many people are harmed and that the sealed doors have bowed, allowing contamination to also enter this building. The GM meter indicates that there is no distinction between the inside and exterior. Yoshida then orders his troops to secure as many doors as they can before walking outside and discovering more injured men. Yoshida notices the horrifying amount of smoke left by the explosion in the reactor building as soon as he turns around the bend. An official hurries to Azuma's office in Tokyo to switch on the news, and they are now able to see the explosion as well. Azuma demands information, but no one is willing to divulge any specifics. Employees outside the facility put in a lot of effort to rescue every injured person, treat their wounds, and monitor their contamination levels. While the hose they were using to connect to the wharf shows indications of damage, several personnel take care of resealing the doors. Although the containment tank is now exposed, it appears that no one was killed in the explosion. They don't know what to do without the hose, but a worker arrives and says that they'll make the connection from scratch because the exterior fire hydrants also have hoses. Reporters in Tokyo discuss the possibility of radiation threat on television, but Toko sends word that everything is still fine. Concerned Azuma is informed by a worker that the building exploded due to hydrogen, not the reactor, and that the initial high radiation level brought on by the explosion has now subsided. At that point, Toko phones and warns Azuma's group that rolling blackouts will be implemented due to a power deficit in the Tokyo region. Running the hose takes too long since the personnel outside are using the GM meters to determine what debris they can touch. Yoshida calls them and informs them of the backwash valve pit, which should still be underwater as a result of the tsunami right now. They will throw the hose there instead of the wharf because it is closer. Azuma learns shortly after that the factory intends to employ salt water since the containment vessel pressure is once more rising. Azuma is concerned that the contaminants in salt water could cause an explosion, but Murakami's arrival and his desire to talk about the rolling blackouts cut off the conversation about the dangers. The only way to prevent a power peak, he says, is to divide the Kanto region into 5 groups and impose blackouts one after the other. Otherwise, they won't have enough power to finally restart each station. A government official phones Yoshida to order him to cancel the salt water proposal while they are debating the risks of leaving hospitals and individuals who are dependent on life support without electricity. Yoshida, however, refuses. The other officials advise Toko to proceed with the rolling blackouts, but warn them that they would be held accountable if anyone is killed. Since they don't want to be accused of murder, Toko's corporate offices will cut power to their most important clients in order to make adjustments. After a protracted dispute, Yoshida is forced to halt all salt water injection and shift the hose to the scant amount of remaining fresh water after Toko phones the plant to cancel the plan. Everyone is checked to see if there is any contamination before they are allowed to enter the plant, and Azuma becomes impatient and yells at the workers. Yoshida arrives with a few maps to show how time-consuming and dangerous it is to manually open the valves in the dark when he hears that venting will begin in 3 hours due to the need for preparations. The mission staff won't return if things continue like way. Finally, understanding the situation, Azuma gives his agreement before requesting that the camera be turned off as he leaves. Yoshida makes a call to the control room to let them know that the evacuation of civilians is complete, allowing the venting mission to start at last. The team enters the service building while wearing protective gear and special masks, where they quickly learn that the radiation levels are higher than anticipated. Astonished to learn that if the venting doesn't work, the entire ground will reach that level and be exposed to several sieverts, these high statistics also reach the authorities. The officials decide to investigate a report about a worker who was exposed to that amount of radiation in 1999. And they discover how severe the burning may be. The employee's terrible condition is revealed in a flashback, and on the 80th day, he passed away. If they don't finish the venting, everyone's future will be like this. Azuma is already in such a foul attitude that they consider telling him about this, but they decide against it. 2 employees discover the first valve in the Unit 1 reactor building, which is somewhat jammed. By exerting all of their might, they gradually turn it and allow it to open to the necessary percentage for the mission. After that, they hastily return to the control room and call Yoshida to inform him about the valve as well as the high radiation levels within the unit. Yoshida orders them to dispatch the second team right away. The second team gets ready in the control room and departs for the Unit 1 reactor building. They must traverse a very long bridge because their valve is in a place where there is no concrete to shield them from the radiation. Nevertheless, they muster up the bravery to open the door. When the dosimeter eventually reaches its maximum radiation level, one of the workers advises that they return to the area. The other declines, claiming that saving everyone is more crucial, but the first one says that even if they attempt, they won't be able to reach the valve. After some conflict, Team 2 eventually makes its way back to the control room. It would have been useless to stay, the leader determines after checking the radiation residue level on their clothing. As the radiation levels in the room gradually rise, Yoshida agrees that it is too much to handle and instructs them to send Team 2 to the hospital. The junior control room staff members ask the leader for permission to go since they want to see their families, and there is nothing they can do here while Yoshida and his team start debating fresh ideas. The leader, however, makes a speech about how they are the last hope and promises to let everyone go when they reach the breaking point. The seniors join the leader in pleading with everyone to stay in the interim. Team 2 ultimately arrives at the offices, where they are directed to the doctor as Yoshida makes a statement about sending 2 replacement staff to the control room. 2 volunteers are ready right away, and Yoshida informs them that the rescue team has thought of a solution. If they link a compressor to the piping, there's a chance they could exert pressure from the outside to remotely open the valve. Despite the slim prospects, they agree to try in tandem with Team 3's entry. Team 2 is being put through a unique chilling shower in the meanwhile. A worker checks their radiation levels when they're finished, but they're still too high, so they need to wash again. The replacement employees arrive at the control room and request to join Team 3 because they are the most familiar with the route due to their lengthy employment at the facility. The leader finally decides to make the transition after some hesitation. Yoshida alerts the control room to the presence of white smoke coming from the Unit 1 pipeline at that precise moment. The leader goes after the third new team as they have already left to stop them. He makes it to the pair barely in time after a lot of running and drags them back to the control room. Unfortunately, the mobile generator is unable to reach Unit 2 due to the roads, which are being obstructed by awful debris, including the cars of people who were unable to evacuate and a coastal tank. They start moving a lot of cables to create the connection. The connection will entail running 200 meters of wire, which typically requires large machinery due to its weight. However, today they will have to run the cable by hand in the dark. With only the helmet lights to guide them and some trembling, the workers start moving the cables quickly and forcefully. Then they learn that the man had fallen into a manhole because the tsunami had pushed the lid away, and rush to help him out after finding him in the water. When the aftershocks start trembling again at that very moment, Yoshida is forced to put an immediate stop to the expedition since they are so severe this time. Then they receive a call from the control room informing them that Unit 1's reactor pressure is increasing, indicating that it has never cooled. This is due to the fact that the IC was shut down immediately following the earthquake in order to prevent overcooling, but they were never able to turn it back on because the power failed. They find out shortly after that the containment vessel's pressure has exceeded its limit, and that it could rupture at any time. Yoshida determines that the motor-operated venting valves should be moved, possibly releasing the gas into the atmosphere. When Azuma learns about the plan, he questions whether the gas will be safe. An official responds that the gas will exit after passing through water, thus the radioactivity of it should be very low. Venting has never been attempted anyplace in the globe, and the administration is concerned about how other countries may respond. Another issue is how they will operate the valves without power. A few employees have entered the plant's administration building, which is in total disarray. When an unexpected aftershock strikes the building, they are searching for information on the valves to prevent operating blindly. Fortunately, nobody is wounded, and they continue. Azuma and his officials are still debating the dangers of releasing the gas and the appropriate width of the evacuation ratio. But because they are still in the dark, they continue to ramble on without coming to any conclusions. They are concerned that at this rate they will lose access to Units 2 through 6 as well, and that they may end up exploding given that Unit 1 is already too radioactive to be approached. Azuma, who has no other option, gives them permission to vent. They discover the plumbing schematics in the administrative building and discover that someone will need to enter the structure and manually open the valves in order to construct a vent. Yoshida calls the control room to relay the information, and the boss now has the dreadful chore of deciding which employees will participate in this hazardous operation. Another news conference in Tokyo declares that venting will take place, but one of the officials abruptly changes the information and claims that Unit 2 is fine and only Unit 1 would require venting. Azuma plans to take a chopper to Fukushima as well because he is fed up with all of his informants being ineffective. Nobody offers to do the venting in the control room, and when the leader says he'll do it himself, Furu says he'll do it and the leader should stay here. Others are motivated to volunteer as a result of this. After splitting the group into 3 teams of 2, Yoshida commands his men to gather every piece of protective equipment they can locate and bring it to the control room. A camera follows Azuma everywhere after he comes. They certify that the nuclear disaster response center's access roads have been closed, that they lack electricity and internet, and that their only means of communication are 6 satellite phones. The Act on Special Measures Concerning Nuclear Emergency Preparedness directs citizens to evacuate promptly. Nevertheless, the evacuation zone will now need to be defined. They won't be evacuated for the time being because there have been no reports of radioactive material. It is revealed during another press conference. A man is dispatched from the control room to the roof to monitor the waves so he can inform them if another tsunami is on the way. Using their tiny flashlights, 2 other personnel examine housing units 1 and 2, making their way to the doors that protect the nuclear reactor through the pitch-black buildings. The workers flee as the GM meter abruptly goes crazy, signaling radioactive contamination in the space. They go back to the control room to deliver the bad news, and as they start to ponder how they'll construct a water injection line, Furu unexpectedly shows up, revealing that he's taken meters and full face masks from the isolated building. When Yoshida receives word that the military department will send 2 fire trucks, he calls the control room and requests that they set up a water injection line. Then a few guys are dispatched to open 5 valve sites in housing units 1 and 2 under Furu's direction. As they cautiously enter, they discover dirt all over the place and even a dead fish. They finally reach the door securing the Unit 1 turbine, open it, and are startled as the building suddenly begins to shake as they do. Thankfully, it ends abruptly without any injuries. As the team progresses further inside, they discover many leaks of water. The first valve is simpler to reach than anticipated, so they open it as they begin connecting the car batteries in the control room. The team then continues searching for the next valve, only stopping when an aftershock causes the structure to tremble. They quickly locate valves 2 through 4, successfully open them, and are left with only valve number 5. They must cooperate to open the valve because it is somewhat jammed while the GM meter is warning that the dosage is rapidly increasing. The last valve is similarly opened after much work, but in the control room they see the water level doesn't rise. Azuma finds out shortly after that the radioactive fuel would begin to leak in less than an hour. In order to get a power source to the facility, Azuma instructs his soldiers to force residents to clear the congested roadways using patrol cars while everyone panics because they were warned not to flee. He finally orders an evacuation as well, but the lack of information makes it difficult for them to determine how large it should be. They ultimately decide on the customary 3 kilometers. The evacuation is announced at a second press conference, but they claim it is only a precaution. The personnel of the control room call Yoshida to inform them that although the valves were opened, the water levels did not rise and that it was difficult to return to open additional valves due to the radiation level. Therefore, they would have to wait for the fire trucks to directly inject the water. Yoshida explains that due to the blocked roads, they are unsure when the trucks will arrive. However, at that very moment, word breaks that an electric firm from northern Japan has deployed a vehicle-mounted high-voltage generator, giving them hope. The control room staff then tries to connect the generator after informing Azuma of the situation, but they run into difficulties because most switchboards have been harmed by the salt water. The workers eventually discovered a functional switchboard within the Unit 2 turbine as meltdown time draws near. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification for more movie recaps.